Our next speaker is Dr. Carol Conzelman. She is a professor in the anthropology department here at CU.
I'm an instructor for the anthropology department, and I'm also the associate director of the Global Studies academic program, so not formally an anthropology department. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mike. Let's give a round of applause for Mike's work. Mike is a third-year chemistry PhD student, and I was telling him when we were orienting when he was sharing emails with us that thank goodness we had a chemist formulating this concoction. So I'm going to start with just a couple of sobering statistics about our country today, and there are many, many that could be discussed in this context. The 400 richest individuals in the United States control more wealth than 150 million people, which is the bottom half of our country, the population of our country. I'm not going to read through all of these individually. In fact, I'm going to put this slideshow on a rotation while I'm talking. I want to share with you today what I have learned about democracy in my work as an anthropologist in Bolivia and Latin America in general, and as a teacher of classes on social change, culture and power, globalization, Latin American history, immigration in the American Southwest, labor union syndicalism, U.S. foreign policy, the drug war, and indigenous social movements. So these are all sort of informing my perspective on this issue, and I feel very privileged to contribute today. I'm hoping that democracy will not, after you hear what I have to say, will not just be an empty signifier, but will have real meaning. Although what we're seeing today with the Occupy movement really is just the very beginning. So we should keep that in mind. So let me see. I can put this on. I don't see how to make it move. Set up show. Start show. Oh, usually it should just be slideshow. Okay, well, hopefully it'll go. Anyway, so what you are going to see are some slides that I put together of what I think democracy looks like in this world and in this country, and drawing on historical examples. So I will get to this a little bit later, some of these concrete representations of what democracy looks like. But you can sort of look at these as I'm going along. So the main thing that I've learned is that the meaning of democracy is a cultural construct, born of the history of a people and organized movements and models that have been developed over time in a particular place to address particular sorts of objectives and according to particular sorts of cultural values. So if democracy is a cultural phenomenon, then that means it is something that can evolve. And respond to changing circumstances and political and economic and environmental exigencies. In other words, any cultural system is really just a human experiment, acted out in real time and in the real world. Which also means that the people carrying out these experiments are obliged to be aware of and respond to the impacts of the system that has been created and adjust them accordingly. So when studying the phenomenon of democracy, we have to consider both the meanings of democracy and the practices of this idea. And there have been a lot more examples of experiments with democracy in the world throughout time than we might realize. Of course, the United States is not the first or the only model of what democracy means or how it can be structured. Of course, we have the Greeks in the city-state of Athens developed a model called the Assembly or the Polis around 500 BCE, based on the principle of direct participatory democracy. And the Romans developed a system of citizenship in republican assemblies around the same time. In the Andes, there was a system called the IU that was based on a rotation of leadership and a redistribution of resources along kinship lines to take advantage of the extreme topography of the Andean mountain region. Two of the other most oldest recognized democratic systems were developed in Iceland in 930 CE, the Common Era, called the All-Thing, which was a prototype of national parliament system in which there were elected representatives that met to deliberate policy without an executive branch. And the Five Nations of the Americas, or the Haudenosaunee, who established the Great Law of Peace in 1000 CE, to end the reciprocal violence between the Oneida, the Mohawk, Seneca, Cayuga, and Onondaga nations with a rule-bound council that governed according to referendum and consensus. We also have, there's a lot of research on the Islamic traditions of democracy, as well as particular forms of Buddhism and the democratic system within Buddhism. And in each case, there were aspects of these systems that worked really well, and aspects that ended up undermining their longevity. And so, as a scholar of democracy, I find it really interesting to look back into these different systems and why people developed certain strategies to address the questions of their day. So we must ask, what is the meaning of democracy? I.e., what should democratic society look like? What do you think your democratic society should look like? What kind of economic policies and wealth and resource distribution should be in place? What values does a society have and want to strengthen? Which is the idea of democracy. I'd like you to take just 1 minute, those of you participating today, to talk with your neighbor about this and just share what kind of values do you think you have that should be represented in our democracy, and what do you think a democratic society should look like? Just 1 minute. Go ahead and talk with the people next to you. Think that the political economic system in the United States is aligned with your values? How many people think that there is a legitimate avenue toward reform using our democratic system as it stands? So, the values that are promoted by the Occupy Wall Street movement, as I understand it, include things like promoting socioeconomic relative equality, not absolute equality. So we're not talking about communism. We are talking about paying attention to the injustices produced by a capitalist system, getting the money out of politics, checking U.S. hegemony in the world, strengthening the state to increase regulations on the private sector and to realign the federal budget away from war and corporate subsidies and toward social welfare, social spending. Making sure that the collective